Okay, we're in Avodah Daf 74, so we're almost done here. But we start off with a new Mishnah. Well, the Mishnah, it says, "These following items are themselves forbidden, and any amount of them renders other items with which they become mixed forbidden. Wine used for libation, and objects of idol worship, and hides with a tear opposite the heart, indicating the idolatrous practice of sacrificing hearts of live animals." So in this halacha also applies to an ox that has been condemned to be stoned. Exodus 21:28. From which it is prohibited to derive benefit even before its sentence is carried out, and it applies to a heifer whose neck is broken when a person is found killed in an area between two cities and the murderer is unknown. So Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 1 through 9, which is likewise forbidden from the time it is taken down to the river to be killed. In these cases, if the animal becomes mixed in a herd of similar animals, all the animals in the herd are forbidden. And this halacha also applies to birds designated for purification of a leper, Leviticus 14, in the shorn hair of a Nazarite, Numbers 6:18, in a firstborn donkey, Exodus 13:13, and meat that was cooked in milk, Exodus 23:19, in the scapegoat of Yom Kippur, Leviticus 16, verses 7 through 10, and the meat of non-sacred animal that was slaughtered in the temple courtyard. And all of these are forbidden themselves, and any amount of them renders a mixture forbidden. So the Gemara now says, according to what criterion does the Tana who teaches this Mishnah reckon the cases? If he reckons based on any item that is counted, that is, any item that is significant enough to be considered individually, which therefore cannot be nullified in a mixture, even in a very large majority of permitted items, let him also teach the case of significant cuts of an unslaughtered animal carcass. And if he reckons based on items from which deriving benefit is prohibited, let him also teach the case of leavened bread on Passover. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, and some say it was Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha, who said, this Tana has two criteria. He reckons based on any item that is both counted and from which his deriving benefit is prohibited. So the Gemara challenges, but let the Tana teach the cases of perach nuts, a type of nut that has a brittle shell, and badan pomegranates, so pomegranates from badan, as these fruits are considered significant, and when they grow during the first 3 years after the tree was planted, or the orla, they belong to the category of items that are counted and from which deriving benefit is prohibited. The Gemara responds, the Mishnah taught that case there in Tractate Orla 3.7, where perach nuts and badan pomegranates are listed among forbidden items that cannot be nullified in a mixture. And it is stated with regard to such items, those items to which the prohibition of Orla applies render the entire mixture forbidden by imparting to it the status of Orla, while those to which the prohibition of diverse kinds planted in a vineyard applies render the mixture forbidden by imparting to it the status of diverse kinds planted in a vineyard. Therefore, it is unnecessary to mention those cases here. So the Gemara suggests, but let the Tana teach the case of loaves of a homeowner, each of which is unique and significant, with regard to the prohibition against deriving benefit from leavened bread on Passover. The Gemara explains, whom did you hear who says that such loaves are not nullified in a mixture? This is taught by Rabbi Akiva, and he taught it there in Tractate Orla 3.7. So Rabbi Akiva adds the list of loaves of a homeowner. At the end of the Mishnah here, the Tana reiterates the halacha stated at its beginning, saying, all of these are forbidden themselves, and any amount of them renders a mixture forbidden. The Gemara asks, the purpose of this reiteration is to exclude what? The Gemara answers, it serves to exclude any item that is counted, but from which deriving benefit is not prohibited, or to exclude items from which deriving benefit is prohibited, but that are not counted. So now back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, in a case of wine used for libation that fell into a wine cistern, it is prohibited to derive benefit from all of the wine in the cistern, even if the volume of the wine used for libation was tiny in comparison to the volume of the wine in the cistern. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, all of the wine in the cistern may be sold to a Gentile, and the money paid for it is permitted except for the value of the wine used for libation that is included in it. Now back to the Gemara. The Rav says, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel in a case where a barrel of wine used for libation became intermingled with barrels of permitted wine, but not when the wine itself became mixed with permitted wine. And Shmuel says, even when the wine itself became mixed with permitted wine, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And likewise, Rabbi Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, even when wine became mixed with wine, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And likewise, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says that Rabbi Hanina says, even when wine became mixed with wine, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And likewise, Rab Nachman says that Rabbi Bar Avu says, even when wine became mixed with wine, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. So Rab Nachman says the practical halacha is that with regard to wine that was actually used for libation, wine that became mixed with wine renders the entire mixture forbidden. But if a barrel became intermingled with barrels of permitted wine, it is permitted to sell the barrels in the manner described by Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. With regard to nondescript wine of Gentiles, which is forbidden due to the suspicion that it was used for libation, even if wine became mixed with wine, it is permitted to sell the mixture in the manner described by Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Okay, back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, in a case of a stone wine press that a Gentile lined with pitch, and then poured wine into the pitch to neutralize its flavor, one may cleanse it, and it is pure. So that is the wine pressed, and it is permitted. And if the wine press is fashioned of wood, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, one may cleanse it, but the rabbis say, meaning the majority, one must peel off the pitch completely. And if the wine press is of earthenware, even if one peeled off the pitch, this press is forbidden. The Gemara now says, Rava says the requirement to cleanse the wine press applies specifically if the Gentile lined it with pitch. But if he only trod on his grapes in it without lining it with pitch, this is not required. The Mishnah asks, isn't this obvious? We learned in the Mishnah that cleansing the wine press is necessary if the Gentile lined it with pitch. The Gemara responds, lest you say that the same is true, that it requires cleansing even if he trod on his grapes in it. The fact that the Mishnah teaches a case where he lined it with pitch is because the Mishnah is teaching the manner in which the matter typically occurs. Therefore, Rava teaches us that this is not the case. There are those who say that Rava says, cleansing the winepress is effective specifically if the Gentile lined it with pitch. But if he trod on his grapes in it as well, cleansing it is not sufficient to purify the winepress. The Gemara asks, isn't this obvious? We learned in the Mishnah that cleansing the winepress is sufficient if the Gentile lined it with pitch. The Gemara responds, lest you say that the same is true, and that cleansing is sufficient even if he trod on his grapes in it. And the fact that the Mishnah teaches a case where he lined it with pitch is because the Mishnah is teaching the manner in which the matter typically occurs. Therefore, Rava teaches us that cleansing the winepress is sufficient specifically if he lined it with pitch, but if he trod on his grapes in it, cleansing it is not sufficient. This is similar to an incident involving a certain man who came before Rabbi Chia and said to him, give me a man who will purify my winepress that I purchased from a Gentile. As Rabbi Chia said to Rav, go with him and see to it that you conduct yourself in such a manner that will not cause people to complain against me in the study hall. So Rav went with him and saw that the winepress was very smooth with pitch. So Rav said, cleansing will certainly be sufficient for this, because it does not absorb the wine. So while Rav was coming and going, he saw a crack underneath his feet and saw that it was full of wine. He then said, cleansing is not sufficient for this. Rather, it requires peeling. And this is what my uncle Havivi meant when he said to me, see to it that you do not cause people to complain against me in the study hall. The sages taught with regard to the winepress and its utensils, the ladle and the funnel, which belong to the Gentiles, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi permits them by cleansing, and the rabbis deem them forbidden. So, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi concedes with regard to earthenware jugs belonging to Gentiles that they are forbidden. And what is the difference between this case and that case? This jug contains wine for storage purposes, and that case, involving a ladle and a funnel, involves utensils that do not contain it for storage purposes, but only temporarily. And if the winepress or its utensils are fashioned of wood or stone, one must cleanse them. But if they were lined with pitch, they are forbidden, and cleansing is not sufficient to render them permitted. The Gemara raised an objection to the last clause of the Braita, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah that in the case of a stone winepress that a Gentile lined with pitch, one may cleanse it, and it is pure? The Gemara answers, the Mishnah is referring to a case where the Gentile did not tread on his grapes in it, whereas the Braita is referring to a case where he trod on his grapes in it. The master said above, with regard to the winepress and the ladle and the funnel that belong to Gentiles, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi permits them by cleansing, and the rabbis deem them forbidden. The Gemara asks, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah that if the winepress is of earthenware, even if one peeled off the pitch, this press is forbidden? So Rava said, in the last clause of the Mishnah, we arrive at the opinion of the rabbis. So Rava taught, if one has a tank of wine used by Gentiles, he must scald it in order to render it permitted for use. When Rava would dispatch empty kegs to Harpanya, he would turn them over, placing them in their sacks on their openings, and seal the sacks on their brims, so that the Gentile carriers would not be able to use them for wine. He maintained that with regard to anything that is used to contain wine for storage, even if the wine may be used in it only temporarily, the sages decreed it is forbidden for use as though it had contained wine. The Gemara asks with regard to the cleansing mentioned in the Mishnah, how does one cleanse a winepress or utensils used by a Gentile for wine? So Rava says one cleans it with water. So Rabbi Bar Chana says one cleans it with ashes. The Gemara asks, when Rav says one cleans it with water, does he mean only with water and not with ashes as well? Furthermore, when Rabbi Bar Chana says one cleans with ashes, does he mean only with ashes and not with water as well? Rather, their statements must be understood as follows. And that is the end of Daf 74.